What would it take for the New Orleans Saints to get a surprise win against the Jacksonville Jaguars? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for making Locked On Jags and Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can always subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. We've got Locked On Jaguars. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. The Locked On Jaguars host, Tony Wiggins at Shop Talking Wig on your favorite social media. Myself, Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast at Ross Jackson. Nola, we appreciate you very much for being here with us for this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jags and Locked On Saints. We're going to today be going through and looking at what each team needs to do to get a win, the biggest matchups that can decide this game, and we're going to start it all off, of course, with the biggest stories for each of these teams going in. We also want to tell you that today's episode, this crossover Thursday edition, is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, the easiest and easily most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com, just Locked On NFL. Use the promo code in all lowercase Locked On NFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Tony, them Jacksonville Jaguars coming to the Big Easy, trying to make it not so easy for the New Orleans Saints to try to get back on the grind here. What's the biggest story for these Jags coming to town, homie?
The biggest story is that Trevor Lawrence is a little gimpy, right?
A little gimpy?
Yeah, just a little bit. He did practice on a limited basis. Showed up at the presser without his knee brace on. So everybody is reading into that. But he says he's going to do everything he can to get out there. But even the fact that he's playing with an offensive line that's going to be missing one starter, they don't have a lot of cohesion because Cam Robinson just got back a couple of games ago. And then they have a rookie at right tackle who's going to be facing a first ballot Hall of Famer. The last thing you want is a guy whose getaway car has a flat tire. And that's what they have right now. So it's going to affect the game plan. I think he's going to play. Even if they don't, they're going to run the exact same offense. But obviously, there's a difference between Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Beathard. But at least there's continuity. And we know how it is when you have a backup quarterback that's been in the same system. He can do what he needs to do for a little bit, but we just got to make sure that it's enough. But I anticipate him playing, but I also anticipate them getting the ball out of his hand real quick because the Saints are not going to have to worry about his mobility as much as they normally would.
Yeah, and that's actually been a little bit of a kryptonite for the New Orleans Saints defense so far, is when a quarterback can get the ball out quickly. And so that's actually one of those things that you look at and you go, oh, no, maybe that's not really the most advantageous thing for the New Orleans Saints to be dealing with over on the defensive side. But it is kind of a relief, I think, if you're the New Orleans Saints, that you don't necessarily have to deal with every aspect of the unicorn, right, in Trevor Lawrence, in that mobility and all those other pieces. And we all know the New Orleans Saints defense has struggled against those mobile quarterbacks. So if that mobility is limited, that could be big.
It could also be big because something that we talked about in pre-show is you guys play man-to-man across the board. Time. One of the trepidations with playing man-to-man is while you're not facing the quarterback, he's behind you running towards you. And now they may not have to be able to, they may not have to worry about that as much. So now when they're in their man principles, they can focus on the receivers. And that is something that the Jaguars have to worry about.
Yeah, that's big. It's a lot more comfortable in something that the Saints are already comfortable doing. So that could be big. That's great. I look at the New Orleans Saints right now, and I would tell you that the biggest story for them is that their offense has been really bad so far this season. And this is the absolute chance for them to be able to kind of have this bounce back. You could be as bad as you want through the first 3 games of the season, the first 6 games of the season, all of that. It doesn't matter. But when it comes to the point where you have to muster up what it takes to face adversity, you have to show up and you have to respond. If you want to be great, that means that you got to go through the dark nights. You can't just be good when it's nice, bright, and shiny outside and the roses and rainbows are going and all that, right? Like, that's not the way to be great. The way to be great is to win when they think you can't and to show up when you think you can't. And right now, the New Orleans Saints are firmly placed in the position of everyone expecting that they cannot show up, myself included, on the offensive side. This is the biggest opportunity that they've had so far all season to go up against a quality opponent and show up when no one expects them to do so. To me, that's the biggest story for this team. Can they respond when it matters? That's
going to be a big story. And, I don't want to sit here and talk about the Saints as if they're 1-5. This is why stats, you look at them at 3-3 and you say, well, why is Ross sounding like the world is falling apart? That's because Ross watches the game. And Ross understands that stats may not lie, numbers may not lie, but they don't tell the whole story. So the Jaguars are 4-2. They play one clean game all year. So they could very well be 3-3 also if they didn't clean up some stuff. But you're exactly right. Now the table is set for them to actually do well, New Orleans to do well, because if you need something to happen that hasn't happened all year, the Jaguars are missing their best corner. That's one thing, right? The other thing that's going on is it's a short week.
Yep.
It's Thursday night. You're at home. It's unorthodox. If you want things to change, don't celebrate Christmas on the 25th. Do it on the 23rd. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Kind of change everything up. And usually it's this time, and that's the danger in this, and I'll get into that a little bit with the Jaguars. Usually that's the time that somebody finds that little elixir or that little antibiotic that cures everything, even if it's for 1 week. Jaguar fans don't want this week to be that week for you guys.
Yeah. The New Orleans Saints have carried a bit of a reputation for a long time as being the team that loses the games that they shouldn't and wins the games that they shouldn't. And this is one of those games that they shouldn't win. This is a game that when it was on the schedule at the schedule release, I said, okay, that's a loss for the New Orleans Saints. All those things that you just mentioned of the unconventionality that comes with it. Unconventionality. That's a word. You know me. I'm just making stuff up. You know how I'll be.
I'm sitting there keeping count. Every time you mess up, you're going to hear about it, right?
Yes. Somebody get me some notes. But I mean, like anytime that you have sort of that unconventional, those games and things like that, like there's an opportunity for anything to happen here. But I think that the New Orleans Saints need to be able to win in a situation that doesn't feel fluky for a change. And that's been sort of the thing that's happened with them when they've established their biggest wins. 34-0 shutout against the New England Patriots. Last year, they had a big win, a 24-0 shutout against the Las Vegas Raiders. They had a fantastic win against the Los Angeles Rams. They went to Cleveland and played in, subarctic temperatures and won that game. Like it's always been sort of these weird, unconventional wins, but they haven't really shown the ability to consistently win over the course of the past 23 games, the games that mean something and the games that make a big statement because of their inability to produce on the offensive side. That's why I think that they have to have a major turnaround in this game for Thursday night. And as Tony just mentioned, there's absolutely a chance that could happen. It could happen. It's Halloween spooky season. You never know.
Yeah.
You never know. All right, coming up next, we're going to be taking a look at the matchups that define this game and how there is a piece of what the New Orleans Saints do that they can take advantage of and a piece of what the Jacksonville Jaguars do that they can take advantage of. We're going to break all that down as we continue on with this episode of Locked On Jaguars, Locked On Saints here on this crossover Thursday as a part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, you see this hat I got on? Just Bird Dogs. That's what it is. And you know what Bird Dogs is? Man, Bird Dogs is the absolute best shorts that I've ever worn. Somebody actually told me at football practice, man, you look like you lost weight. No, all I did was just change the shorts that I have because Bird Dogs are made of a stretch khaki shorts and they're designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dogs are functional for any occasion, golf, dating, football, dinner, all of that stuff. And I'm telling you, man, they are off the chain. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL and enter the promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you, unless you absolutely have to. That's Bird Dogs, man. Check them out. The greatest shorts I've ever owned in my life.
All right, y'all, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Jaguars and Locked On Saints here as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Saints and Locked On Jags your first listen of the day every day. Now we're going to break down the matchups that can win, change, decide this Thursday night game between the Saints and the Jags. Tony, why don't you get us started here? Because I think we're looking at this game pretty similarly in terms of where this game can be decided.
For me, the game's going to be decided in the trenches, and I know that is so cliche. I mean, you've heard that from Pop Warner. You think Hank Stram is sitting here doing this show? And all I didn't say matriculate. That's all.
I said matriculate in my show yesterday.
You did. No, you ain't getting all Hank Stram on me, man. You know what I'm saying? Listen, I didn't hear it, by the way, because I only listen to my own show, so I know I ain't listening to somebody else's show, right? But no, the thing is, it couldn't be more true because of a number of factors. One, I use the C's when I talk about offensive line play: cohesion, continuity. There's a few other ones. I always forget cohesion, continuity, chemistry, and then there's consistency, right? All of that stuff. Well, the Jags don't have that because Cam Robinson missed the first 4 games because of a PED suspension. Then when he did come back, they moved Walker Little from left tackle. He's playing very well to left guard. And they have a rookie, Anton Harrison, who's a bit of a turnstile right now because he's learning, and he's learning the hard way. But anybody get beat by Chris Jones, ain't no problem. Luke Fortner at center is a really good player, but he's a technician. Sometimes he can lose out when someone has a very powerful guy, like, say, a Vita Vea. That would give him all kinds of fits. And Brandon Sheriff, he's older and he gets hurt a lot. So there's a lot going on there. Walker Little won't play. They have to plug somebody in at left guard. And now for me, I'm looking at it from the offensive side. You got a rookie facing a first ballot Hall of Famer in your guy over there. So it's just
Cam Jordan.
Yeah, Cam Jordan, who I saw you going back and forth with on Twitter, by the way. That was pretty cool. But,
Cam's my dude.
Right. So if the Jaguars can't sustain drives and they turn the ball back over, then their strong unit, which is their front seven, then they'll get worn out and they'll lose the disadvantage that they have because the Saints are banged up a lot. So if you're banged up, that's fine if somebody keeps giving you opportunities. Eventually, with your playmakers, with Olave and Kamara and the rest of those guys, they're going to be able to get something going and make some plays. So the key for me is whose offensive line can do the best while they're limited. And then the defensive lines, with the strength of both of these teams, if you look at the units by the unit, they're the strengths of these teams. They all get worn out and be tired. So I really do think it starts and stops with the trenches, but mainly the Jaguars' offensive line, because I think the defensive line, they're going to lose some, but they're going to win some.
Yeah. I think that's a really astute observation, and I love looking at the Saints' defensive line in this perspective, because you've got Cam Jordan on the opposite side there. You've got, Carl Granderson, who's kind of stepped in, but the Saints only return one starter on their defensive line coming into the season, and that was Cam Jordan, who they re-signed to another contract. It looks like he's going to finish his career as a lifer with the New Orleans Saints, just like his daddy did with the Minnesota Vikings, Steve Jordan as a tight end and all that. And that's all cool. But I will say that this New Orleans Saints defensive line has had a lot of trouble in the past taking advantage of injuries on the offensive lines that they're going up against. They usually tend to perform well in games where they're going up against a fully healthy offensive line, but then yet somehow tend to struggle a little bit. But I know that's not a Saints-specific issue. The Jags have had that issue before as well. And so when I look at where, the Saints defensive line can really kind of establish itself as a disruptive force. Right now, they've got 13 sacks, which is tied for 23rd in the NFL. They have a pressure rate of only 19% or just over 19%. That's like 6th lowest in the NFL, if I'm recalling correctly. And so this is a matchup where they really need to take advantage of the rookie, that's going up against the first ballot Hall of Famer, the injury on the offensive line, the Cam Robinson getting back and getting kind of, reestablished on the offensive line. They have got to take advantage of that during this game for sure, especially with a less mobile Trevor Lawrence likely at quarterback. So I love that look.
Yeah, man, it's for real. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that we can't think that it's a given that because another team is missing players, that we're just going to automatically come in and step up, because those guys are trying to earn money too. Case in point, the worst game the defensive line for the Jaguars played all year was against Houston, who was missing 4 starters.
Right.
And it was in week 3. Week 1 and 2, CJ Stroud, the Houston quarterback, had been sacked 11 times. We didn't touch him.
Yep.
And it's the reason why they lost that game. So we have to take advantage of the advantage, because if you don't, that advantage becomes a disadvantage.
Yep. And that's exactly what I'm watching for in this game in terms of the key matchup that changes this contest for the New Orleans Saints is, can the offensive line, which is going to be a patchwork offensive line with Ryan Ramczyk, the starting right tackle, and then James Hurst, who just became the starting left tackle. They just moved him over and benched second year first round pick rookie, Trevor Penning last week. Now both of those tackles are injured. And the way that the New Orleans Saints build their offensive line, which you and I were discussing before we started up here, is similar to the way the Jacksonville Jaguars build their offensive line. There's not, a center that backs up the center, a guard that backs up the guards, and a tackle it's this guy can play a little bit of tackle, a little bit of guard. This guy plays a little bit of center, a little bit of tackle, a little bit of guard, all this other stuff. And damn if they play on the left or right, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And so like that's been an issue for the New Orleans Saints for years, where they have continuously dealt with issues with health on the offensive line. And they did very little to address that this offseason again. And now here they are in this situation. Very likely, if they maintain the idea that Trevor Penning is not their starter anymore, that would mean that their usual starting left guard, Andrus Peat, has to bounce out to left tackle. And then you've got a guy in Cam Irving, who they recently signed to their practice squad, that's going to have to come in at right tackle more than likely, because not only is Ryan Ramczyk, the starting right tackle, out, but the guy that usually backs him up, Landon Young, is also out. So there's going to be all of this mixing and matching that's got to happen. So if the Saints want to take advantage of a secondary that is susceptible, I'll say, to the passing game, and that's without its top corner and Tyson Campbell, a corner that the New Orleans Saints loved in the draft, by the way, they have to be able to protect Derek Carr, which they have shown no ability to do so far this season. And now they're going to be messing around with this patchwork discount offensive line. That offensive line has to find a way to show, we're not greater value brand. We are the store brand. We are Kleenex. We are whatever. We are bird dogs. Like, we got to be out here. And so that's what you need to see from this offensive line if they want to be the deciding factor in this game on the right side of the conversation.
I'm sitting here starting to think that at some point, if there are two offensive line, if you guys get a guy laying on the ground and we get a guy laying on the ground, at some point, Coach Peterson and Coach Allen might come to the center of the field and go, all right, here's what we're going to do. Just take the 5 best offensive linemen both of us have together. We're going to give them red jerseys. They got to play both ways, okay? Like, 3 guys from your team and 2 guys from us. Look, y'all got to play both ways, all right? So we're gonna finish this game one way or another. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's going to be playground, all-time quarterback, but all-time O-line.
That's
and
right.
then that's what you're just going to have to do with it. Man, like that, it's wild, right? Like, it's crazy to me. And I understand that collegiate talent is dwindling when it comes to offensive line, because all of the guys that play offensive line that are the hyper athletic, really strong offensive linemen, they're being moved to, if they're big time athletes, they're being moved to tight end, because tight ends are being drafted in the first round and interior offensive linemen aren't. So if you can be athletic and if you can drop a little bit of weight, we'll move you to tight end. Or if you're athletic and you can't drop the weight, but you're powerful, we're going to move you to the opposite side of the line because we need you rushing the quarterback. And then you're going to do that same thing with moving them to defensive tackle or tackles defensive ends. And so you're seeing bad offensive line play around the NFL as a product of the way that we treat offensive linemen much earlier in the process. It's not necessarily the NFL's fault, but the NFL has a large disadvantage when it comes to that, because they're not able to develop that talent into better offensive line play either. And I think both of these teams, depth-wise, are struggling from that.
They are. And they had this problem in the league with safeties because of the way the passing games were. I had a guy stand at practice maybe 8 years ago and tell me that the hardest thing to find, this is when they were trying to run the system with Gus Bradley, and they were trying to act like they had Earl Thomas out there. And the dude said the hardest thing to find is a guy who can play single high. And you may have 10 guys right now in the NFL that can play single high, and that's because they're not doing it in college. So you're getting guys with these splits, these 7-on-7 type reps in college. They're just guys who are getting in the way. The teams that do a good job, though, are the ones like the Chiefs that actually know how to go out and draft and find guys that actually fit their system. I don't think, for the most part, the Jaguars, they've done all right since Doug Peterson has been there. I would like to see him address a little bit more. But look, when he took over, they were the worst team in the league. So I think it's coming, and it's going to eventually get to the point. Everybody can't be the Eagles right now. That the Eagles got a smorgasbord of a whole bunch of 350. The Eagles got like a 380-pound left tackle. I ain't never seen nothing like that in my life. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what is dude? He's the biggest dude, So Landon Dickerson is like 350, and he ain't the biggest dude on the team. The left tackle is. Normally you wouldn't see that, but everybody can't be as fortunate as Philadelphia. But hopefully we'll have enough. We'll just need 10. 5 for y'all and 5 of us just to make sure we finish this game Thursday.
If they can get through that, they can get through the game. That's it.
Yeah.
All right. We're coming up next. We're going to be taking a look at the things that each of these teams need to do to win this game. And a lot of it comes down to what the New Orleans Saints defense must do. And of course, Trevor Lawrence. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Saints and Locked On Jaguars here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints and Locked On Jaguars is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the #1 sportsbook in all of America, and it's our official sports betting partner here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And right now, new customers are getting $200 in bonus bets simply by heading over to FanDuel right now and placing a $5 bet. That's all you got to do. You put down that $5, you get $200 in bonus bets back, win or lose. That is completely guaranteed. Then you take those $200, you can use them on things like the spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So if you want to get in on this Jacksonville Jaguars and New Orleans Saints game, New Orleans Saints favored at home -1.5. That's that home field advantage. You get 3 points there. So you want to take a look at that, whichever side you're on, there's a real opportunity for you to go and check it out. And no matter what, you're walking away with $200 on a $5 bet if it's your first time placing that bet with FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends at Jace Medical. Go and get you a Jace case. You want to be prepared for everything in life. We're talking about Jacksonville, Florida. We're talking about New Orleans, Louisiana. Y'all know y'all got to be ready for the hurricanes. Y'all got to be ready for the rainy season. Here in New Orleans, you just got to be ready for blackouts. Like, you got to be ready for everything. And so you want to make sure, you've seen the Super Bowl. You want to make sure that you are ready for any emergency. And that's why I love the Jace case. I added it to my hurricane kit and everything. So make sure you got everything so that you're good for, however long you're going to be without power, all that stuff. It is a personalized emergency medication kit that includes 5 essential antibiotics that end up helping you fight different things like the most common and even deadly bacterial infections. You want to have this ready just in case. So go ahead and take care of yourself, your family. Be prepared and get ready to go. You can go ahead and check this out and get $20 off by heading over to jacemedical.com and using the promo code Locked On at checkout. It's going to get you a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code Locked On at JASEmedical.com. All right, y'all, wrapping up this crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Jaguars, Locked On Saints, looking at this Jacksonville Jaguars at New Orleans Saints game here on Thursday night. Tony, we've moved into the final portion of today's show, taking a look at what it's going to take for each of these teams to win. What is it going to take? What do the Jacksonville Jaguars need to do to get a win on Thursday night?
Trevor has to survive. They got to get the ball out of his hand. He has to survive the noise of the Superdome. Every single time I see a night game played in the Superdome, I just can't help but think about Reggie Bush and Drew Brees and right after Katrina and what that meant, not only to the Saints, not only to the NFL, but to just people. And it's loud in there, man. It's loud and it's wild and people are going to be excited. We're talking about a team that's going to be that needs to try to get on schedule, but they're playing off schedule to try to get them back on schedule. What we were talking about earlier, just a quirky night. They have to survive, especially at the beginning onslaught, the noise. Get some points early, get some confidence rolling. Make sure that the Saints defense doesn't take advantage of the fact that Trevor can't get away, and also make sure that they call the game in a way where they maximize everything. They got to take field goals. They can't. Doug Peterson gets inside the 40, man. He's going to go for it on 4th down. I think with Trevor being the way he is, and you taking advantage of the fact that, or not allowing the Saints to take advantage of the fact that your offensive line is a little bit banged up, I think they have to take all the points they can, quiet the crowd early, be in the game in the 3rd quarter once things settle down, and then they can dial some stuff up and try to take advantage of the game.
That's great. Yeah, I think for the Saints, it's got to be the defensive identity. This has to be one of Dennis Allen's best coached games, in my opinion. And I mean that from the offensive and defensive perspective, it has to be one of his best coached games. He's not the offensive play caller, I understand, but making sure that things are happening on the offensive side. But it's got to be his defense that sets the tone in this game. And maybe that means scoring points, but it doesn't have to mean that. It shouldn't have to mean that in order to win a game. But you look at the Houston Texans and the way that they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was an early start, special teams touchdown, deep shot, 68-yard touchdown to Tank Dell and all those other things. There were things that went that well. And of course, that offensive line didn't allow much pressure towards CJ Stroud. But I think when you look at where the Saints can replicate success, it's that Kansas City Chiefs game, that SPAG system, that Dennis Allen system. They're both very, very alike. Press man, single high safety over the top, 4-man rush. They want to get pressure with the front four, stunts, twists, all those things that kind of make it interesting, make life tough for a rookie offensive lineman or a backup offensive lineman or an offensive lineman trying to get back in the rhythm. It's got to be a Dennis Allen mastermind, Dexter's Laboratory. I'm mixing up all of the different, I got a little bit of this pink juice. I got a little bit of this green juice. I got a little bit of this blue juice. Boom, we're blowing up over here. So we got to get all that going. Omelette du fromage. Like, that's got to be what the New Orleans Saints are doing in this game. And it's got to be Dennis Allen. Like, Dennis Allen's got to be the mastermind of this one. So I'm looking at the defense's ability to give the offense a chance in this game. And then I'm not even going to discuss whether or not the offense can take advantage of it, because we have seen that they can't. But if the Saints are going to win this game, if it's going to happen, it's got to be led by the defense, giving the offense their best opportunity.
I would totally agree with that. The other thing is, and this is a little bit less about X's and O's, but more psychological.
Yeah.
I hope the Jags don't pay attention to the injury report. I hope that they know that they're banged up. Like, we got a couple of guys, we're banged up too. That the attitude I want them to have is, they get hurt, but we hurt too. We banged up too. Do not ignore the fact that these are grown men with mortgages and lifestyles.
Hey, everybody need to check, man.
That's right. That make millions of dollars that will bust you in your mouth the second you look complacent. Do not look at the injury report and go, they missing what? They got 1/4 of their roster is on the injury report. Oh man, they banged up. They're lame. Yeah, you know who's dangerous? A German Shepherd, if his leg is hurting and you go up to him and try to pat him, I'm hurting, leave me alone. Good point. Do not want to be the elixir. You do not want to be the thing that wakes them up. And complacency has no place in this game. You have to want to keep that momentum going. They're 4-2. They've now won 2 in a row. They can make it 3. They need to get this game and the one next week against Pittsburgh, because they got a gauntlet coming after that with games against Baltimore, San Francisco, another matchup against Houston. They have a lot of tough games in the middle of that schedule after their bye week, after they play Pittsburgh the following week. And even that's a tough game. That game isn't easy, right? 1 week Pittsburgh's down, the next week they're up. So you got to get this one. And I think they're in a position to do it, but I don't care if they walk out of there 17-16 as long as they win. Speaking
of that, we're going to wrap it up with predictions. Tony, what's your prediction for this game?
17-16. Jaguars.
I love it. You got Jags over Saints, right? 17-16.
Jags over Saints, 17-16.
Tony, I have gone back and forth on this so much because I picked the Saints to lose this game before the schedule release. But the more and more that I dig into this game, the more and more that this feels like that game that doesn't make sense. And so I'm going to do something that I haven't done all season before. Usually I stick with my predictions from preseason into, from the schedule release into this one. I'm going to take the Saints to win this game because it would make absolutely no sense for them to do so. I don't know what the score is going to be. It could be 3-2. It could be 30-20. It doesn't matter. I'm going to take the Saints to win this game because it feels like something that might happen. Now, predictions are all about being wrong. So we'll see if I'm wrong. But I'm going to say that this is a game where the New Orleans Saints find a way to show up when they most need to. Again, being great is not about excelling when the sun's out. Being great is about excelling when it's cold, you're covered in snow, and you don't know where to go. Like, that's got to be where this New Orleans Saints team is. So I'm going to take them with a little bit of extra motivation to surprise here on Thursday Night Football. Keep the receipts. Come at me later. Totally fine. I'm mostly doing this for the voodoo. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how it all works out.
I got you. I ain't get my oysters. Char grilled oysters. I might try to do it. I might try to do it myself. So if you come here Friday morning and you see me all burnt up, that means I didn't.
It didn't go well. It didn't go all right.
No, them hot rocks,
I'll tell you this.
Them hot rocks, they backfired on me. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. If the Saints manage to find a way to win this game, I will send you Char grilled oysters. Don't eat them because by the time they get to you, they'll be terrible. But I'll send them to you, and I'll shave my head. I'll do both.
All right. I'll tell you what. The second one, don't worry about it. It's all good. You already paid that half of the bet. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. Yeah. No. Naturally, it's been an issue.
But no, a little housekeeping. This has been a lot of fun. I call Ross all the time. For y'all that don't know, he is my manager on the NFL channel, and it's finally good for us to have a talk with me, not ask him to show me how to do something.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, you showed me how to break down a football game, and I really, really appreciate it. This was a ton of fun. Y'all make sure you go and keep up with Tony Wiggins, not only a fantastic NFL analyst. You can find him on Locked On NFL on Fridays, as well as, of course, every single Monday through Friday over at Locked On Jaguars, but literally one of my favorite people in the entire world. Go and follow him so that you can have a little bit of this joy in your life at Shop Talking Wig on your favorite social media. You can also come and check me out at Ross Jackson Nola Tuesdays on Locked On NFL and every single Monday through Friday at Locked On Saints. We appreciate you joining us here. For Tony, we say thank you very much to all the everydayers out there and for coming through here for Locked On Jags and Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.